Hey YouTube, this is RFX. I know some of you may have thought that this channel is dead. While I can't really deny that my channel gives off that impression, I'm somehow still alive. But enough of that. Today, I want to do something I've been meaning to do for a couple of years now. See, I have this Wavestation A that I bought from a refurbisher a couple of years ago. In case you're unfamiliar, the Wavestation is essentially like a musical instrument. I know it looks more like some kind of oversized VCR, but I promise you this thing can make some pretty great sounds. There's just one problem. Mine kinda doesn't work. This all started a couple of years after I bought it, where I noticed that sometimes when I turned it on, the display would flicker and sometimes just show random garbage on the screen before it would actually boot up. Unfortunately, this problem has only gotten worse with time, and by now I can't get this thing to work at all, so that's why I finally decided to get inside this thing and try my best to get it up and running again. So, after opening it up, the first thing I noticed was the work that was already done to it by the refurbisher. Particularly this bodge wire stood out to me. Seems like this Wavestation has had a bit of a rough life before I got it. Taking a look around, it also seems like the capacitors have been replaced. At least that's what I assume, because this really does not look like it came this way from the factory. This kinda gives me the impression that I bought a Wavestation that used to be defective and had prior repairs done to it. I guess in a case like that, it's not terribly surprising that it would fail again, though maybe it would have worked for longer if the refurbisher had done their job properly. Taking a look at the power supply, it seems that for some reason the refurbisher has replaced every single electrolytic capacitor except for the ones on the power supply. Why would they skip the power supply? I can only speculate here. Maybe they were scared of mains voltage, but then again, you'd expect people who call themselves professional refurbishers to be able to deal with electronics like that. Maybe they were just lazy and found the power supply to be too much of a pain in the ass to remove. Well, I can certainly see why they would think that. But then again, they charged quite a lot of money for that half-assed refurbish. While the Wavestation AD is somewhat rare compared to the regular keyboard version or the smaller rack-mounted Wavestation SR, they usually go for 300 to 400 euros where I live. I paid nearly 500 euros for this one. I figured since I'm buying from an experienced refurbisher, this thing would last me longer so I wouldn't have to do repairs anytime soon. Guess I learned my lesson there. Don't buy overpriced vintage gear from refurbishers. Oh well. I figured since the power supply hasn't been recapped, there's probably something wrong with it. So I decided to check the voltages first. Apparently people were a lot less wasteful back in the 90s, or at least I get that impression. I don't know, I wasn't even born when this thing was released, but check this out. This thing actually comes with a service manual with circuit diagrams and everything. This was clearly intended to be repaired and used for a long time, not like electronics these days that are usually meant to go into a landfill just a few years after release. Using the circuit diagram from the manual, I can clearly see what voltages I should find on what pins, making it really easy to check if the power supply is working properly. So if I go from this pin right here to this pin, we should be getting 12 plus 12. That is correct. To this pin, we should be getting negative 12. We are. The two leftmost pins, those should be 5 volts. That is 5 volts, so the voltages are in fact correct. I wonder where the issue is then. Yeah, to my surprise, the voltages were all fine. Given the flickering display and the intermittent issues, I was almost sure that something was wrong with the power supply, but since the voltages seemed fine, I decided to pretty much take a look around the whole thing. I'll spare you the boring bits of me not finding anything, but have a look at this. Because I was getting kinda desperate at some point, I decided to remove the display to see if there was something wrong with it. The refurbisher actually replaced the display, so this was likely provided by them. Looking at the back of it, I found something pretty odd.
What the hell happened here? What the fuck is that?
You know, up close this just kind of looks like someone had diarrhea all over the motherboard.
Apparently this is quite hard to remove.
Yeah, I cleaned it up just a little bit, but this is still not great. I don't know what the hell happened here. Yeah, I couldn't exactly get that off, but I did do continuity testing and found there to be no issue. I still don't really know what this is, but since it doesn't seem to be an issue, I just kept on looking. And looking. And looking. And yeah, this really isn't getting me anywhere. I honestly couldn't find anything that seemed off, and I was kind of stumped at this point. It got to the point where I just started pressing random buttons over and over again, hoping for a different result. Some people may say that this is the definition of insanity, but I might not have been so insane after all, because in the end, this happened.
I don't understand what's going on here. Should just work, you know? Would have been cool at least if it worked. Like just do the thing. Oh, it's doing something. What the hell is it doing? It's just displaying random lines on the screen now. Pretty thing these buttons somehow did something. They're very loose switches though. This doesn't do anything. None of these seem to do anything really. This doesn't do anything either. This doesn't, I mean obviously this doesn't do anything. But not even setting the contrast changes anything. Okay, it's really freaking out now. And it stopped. And it did it again. And now it stopped again. Oh my god! That's the startup screen! What the hell? It booted? What the fuck? How did this happen? Why did it boot up now? Why? What? How did... What? 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 Can someone explain this to me? This doesn't make any sense at all. How the fuck? Why does it work now? It was fucked. It was completely fucked. I thought this thing was dead for good. And now it's just randomly working. How? Why? I mean, I'm glad, but I'm pretty sure this is not gonna last.
Yeah, turns out it wasn't totally dead after all. The issues were still intermittent. It's just that after all this time, the issues were worse than my patience, so I just kinda gave up on it. While this random stroke of luck clearly wasn't a permanent fix, it gave me confidence that the vital components on the motherboard and the display are fine, so my attention went right back to the power supply. I decided to measure the voltages again, this time while it's working properly. I did this off camera, but I noticed the voltage on the 5-volt line, while slightly lower, was a lot more stable than before. Perhaps there was some pretty bad ripple on the line before and I just didn't notice it because I only measured it on a regular old multimeter. Using an oscilloscope would have probably revealed more information. I don't have one though, so I'll gladly accept randomly getting lucky. Thinking back on it now, that would have also explained the flickering display. It might have just been restarting over and over and over again because the voltage was dropping too much whenever any load was put on the power supply. That's my theory anyways. So I decided to just take the chance, wrote down all of the capacitor values for the power supply, and ordered some spares. In fact, I made sure to get genuine high-quality capacitors from a reputable German vendor instead of just getting random junk off eBay like I usually would. I figured since I'm working on a fairly expensive piece of technology, I better not put garbage components in there. I want the repair to actually last this time after all. Luckily, they all arrived pretty quickly, and now all that's left to do is solder them onto the power supply.
Basically, all I have to do now is get these off the board and solder these new ones on there. For that, I'm going to be using a desoldering station and just a regular soldering station with a soldering iron. It should be quite simple, really. So let's just start by taking off the big one. Let's see if I can get it out. There we go. So let's just get this new capacitor in there. I'm going to choose some thicker solder. This is 1mm solder, and I'm going to put on some safety glasses in case the solder splashes around. Well, the tip's a bit small, but I'm sure I can work with that. Maybe I should have switched to a different one before I started this, though. Oh well. There we go. That's the first capacitor on. Wow, these are in there real good. Let's take this one out next. The legs are bent a little bit outward. This might be a bit awkward to remove, but I'm sure I'm still gonna be able to get this to work. Let's put the new capacitor in there. First solder joint is done. Let me just turn this thing up a little bit because this small tip is really struggling. That's looking good. Again, same orientation. Don't you give up on me now. I need you. The glue is really holding this thing in. Desoldering went just fine. It's just that this thing is glued down pretty hard. Nick. There we go. All this glue came off with it. Negative goes in here. Let me switch to some thinner solder. Maybe that'll melt a bit easier with the small tip that I use. Yeah, that works a bit better. There we go. Now there's a couple more that look like they're pretty glued in, like this one back there. Yeah, sometimes this thing doesn't really like triggering. Is it clogged? Come on. Come on. Suck, you piece of shit. So much for that thing. God damn it. Well, since we're working now, all the suction power might be a bit reduced. That's a quick shit fix. Let's see if I can get this thing out now. Yep, that's worked surprisingly well. Another one of these. 330/25. Got that one on there. Yep, my desoldering gun is clogged. Shit. Alright, I gotta clean that thing. As it turns out, the clog in there is pretty bad. There's like some solder that's solidified right at the end of the pipe there, which means this thing is out of order for a bit. So we're gonna have to just go with some good old desoldering braid. Pretty sure I got some somewhere. This is gonna suck a little bit. So where were we? Right, this capacitor right here. Hopefully it works. And hopefully this doesn't happen. Well, I never said this would be fun. Actually, that reminds me, I have one of these shitty solder suckers. Maybe I can make this one work. I mean, it should be fine for just desoldering a capacitor, right? And we just kind of hold this in there and... yeah, that worked well enough. It's good to always have backups, you know? Otherwise, you might be fucked when one of your tools ends up failing. Just saying. Look at that. Solder joints are loose, now it's just about the glue. There we go. Let's get this capacitor in here. Well, what could possibly go wrong, right? I mean, we've already had a tool break. There could not possibly be any more going wrong here. Well, these ones are all done. I basically ordered twice as many capacitors as I need, just in case literally every single one of them blows up. Because, I mean, I'd say always be prepared for the worst case scenario, right? Let's get these off using the somewhat primitive method. Fuck off, soldering braid. I really don't like you. There we go, that's these two. And it was only a mild pain in the ass. Now there's just this one left. I got it. Make sure this is all nice and clean. There we go. That is the board recapped. Let's just get the screws in here. Now here's a really annoying one. Now we gotta get this starter board back in here. Now that we got this back in, just gotta plug all the plugs back in. Alright, make sure all the capacitors are the right way around, but it looks good. I mean, I really made sure already, but it can never hurt to like double check, triple check, and absolutely fucking quadruple check that this is all done properly. Because I'm going to plug this in now. Now let me just put on the safety goggles again. Alright, time to test this thing. Plug it in. Now this thing really hasn't been plugged in quite some time, so now if this turns on right away, that means it worked. If it blows up, I really fucked up, and if it's like before, then the capacitors were fine to begin with. Let's see. Yes! 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 It works! It works! Haha! What do you say about that? That's great. I fixed it. That's all it needed. It just needed new capacitors on the power supply. Look at that. That's all it was. It was just faulty capacitors. And that kind of goes to show again. I mean, I don't know which one of these it was, but I mean, look at them. They don't look particularly faulty, right? I mean, you can ignore this yellow stuff. This is just glue or epoxy or whatever. These capacitors, they are not bloated at all. I mean, what can you say about that? Don't judge a book by its cover. These capacitors are seemingly done for, at least some of them are. But none of them look bloated. But yeah, this thing works again. Let's put it back together. Case is back together. Now we're just missing the rack ears. And there we go. All back together. Look at that. A fully working Korg Wavestation A. Bam. It just turns on right away now. Is that not absolutely beautiful? To have it be just capacitors. This is a pretty expensive piece of gear, and I just fixed it using like $5, not even $5 worth of capacitors. That's how simple repairs can be sometimes. But you know what? If the refurbisher had actually bothered to refurbish this thing properly, I wouldn't even have had to do this. God damn it. Oh well, I'm glad it works now. Let's put this back in the rack.
Well, that turned out to be quite the simple fault. Seeing the power supply output seemingly correct voltages really threw me off in this repair. I guess that just goes to show that you sometimes can't really trust a multimeter when it comes to the output of a power supply. If you're trying to fix electronics that have very old electrolytic capacitors in there, it's probably a good idea to replace them regardless of whether or not you think they're faulty. Even if they're not faulty yet, at this age it's only a matter of time until they fail, so you might as well replace them all, especially considering how cheap these things are. Oh, and just in case you were wondering, I did manage to unclog my desoldering gun off camera by jamming some desoldering wick into the pipe while it was heated up. So now that I got it back up and running, I might as well give you a quick little demo. After all, a Wavestation isn't exactly something you hear every day. Now, I could just show off a bunch of presets, but there's already plenty of videos out there showing off just about every preset this thing has to offer. That's why I decided to instead put together a short little arrangement that makes very heavy use of the Wavestation. It's not exclusively Wavestation sounds, but most of them are. Anyways, that'll be it for me talking. I hope you enjoyed the video so far, and I hope you'll enjoy the arrangement I put together. See you in another video.
Ultimate salvation. You're about to reach the final destination.